I don't want a pickle, just want to ride on my motorcycle. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Noco Moto Podcast, episode number 267. I'm your host, MotoGP. With me is your other host, Swiggy.
Yo.
Coming to you from Moto One Podcast Network Studios, recording Suite A, otherwise known as the Tiki Room. And, well, I think we can mention this. So I have been fighting this for a long time. Moto One has been wanting to have us do a YouTube channel. We're over my goddamn dead body. Are we going to live stream? That's probably never going to happen. All right. I would, rather than live stream, I would much rather do like a big dumb ride, small stupid ride kind of thing. That's infinitely better. But I would like, well, it turns out no one uses Google anymore. More people use the YouTube search to find content that they want than a Google search. No one Googles for a podcast anymore. So the powers that be, the Moto One president, with whatever flimsy, wishy-washy power he still has decided that we're going to set up some fucking GoPros. So you guys will get to be sort of in the Tiki Room with us at some point. It might take a few more episodes to get this going. I mean, the lighting's pretty dark in here. We got to figure something out to make a video element work. And, you know, it's really not going to add anything to the show if we do this. I mean, we're going to try it at least. But, like, I thought about, like, picture-in-picture and getting the a stream from, like, the Chromecast and seeing if we could just record that stream and do it picture-in-picture, and I could just turn it on and off or something and whatever. And it's just all way too much fucking work.
Work for you. I mean, like, I'm going to have to keep my pants on. I'm going to have to, like, not have, like, 40 minutes of no eye contact.
Yeah.
We have to be presentable. Ugh.
We don't have to be all that presentable. I think we can just sit here. I can just you know. But I think we have also figured that we kind of want to limit the boozing on the show as well. I know some people love the boozing. I don't always. I enjoy it in the moment, but if I'm going back and editing episodes, I'm like, ugh, that 8th beer was a bad decision. You know? It doesn't make for the best audio. But as far as we don't really do that much Googling for images and things. It's really just the best, worst bike pictures and a couple news article things, really. So those will still be in the podcast show notes. And for people who are on YouTube, well, you can just do like small screen the fucking YouTube and Google what we're talking about, right? Like, I don't give a shit. I'm reluctant to start a YouTube channel at all. Like, it sounds like my special hell.
Yeah, there will definitely be limited engagement from there, for sure.
I mean, that means there's going to be a fucking comments section for every fucking video. Ugh. I mean, that just depresses me thinking about it. I mean, the good news is that almost no one will be watching it, so there'll be almost no comments whatsoever. But I would much rather just be able to just go to fucking Patreon and Discord to talk to our people and not have to fucking look at comments. I guess I can just turn off comments for every fucking video, right?
That is an option.
I think that's what I'll have to do. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So with that, let's get to what we're going to talk about on this episode. We're going to do best worst bike in the world this week, obviously. And we are going to catch up on some emails and feedback from listeners. And if we have time after that, the discussion I kind of want to get into is for each category of motorcycles, when did it peak? Because I don't know if we're at the peak of anything right now. We've talked a lot about how many useless features and sort of excessive riding experiences there are right now. And we'll just get into more detail about it when we get to it. But for now, we should just quit wasting more time and dive right into best worst bike in the world this week, right?
Let's do it.
Okay, so this is best worst bike in the world this week. This is where Swigs and I have each chosen a motorcycle. We don't know what each other have chosen. It's always a surprise. If you have issues with that, feel free to send a text to the show by clicking through the show notes. That's if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, which for this episode, you have no choice. That's all that's available, and I wish it was staying that way. Second, you can send an email to where, Swigs?
To contact@nocomotopodcast.com.
Awesome. And with that, Swigs, you have worst bike in the world this week.
I do.
Awesome. And are you ready to reveal it?
I am.
Okay. And the worst bike in the world this week is?
The 2001, very specifically.
Okay.
Triumph Bonneville.
So this is... Ooh, the Bonneville America?
No.
Oh, so this is the T100.
Yes, the first year T100.
I mean, this came out to a lot of fanfare.
It did.
There was the Bonneville America before this, or did that come out? I mean, or did that come out at the same time?
It might have been the same time, or it might have been a little bit earlier. I want to say it was the same time. It might even have been a year after. But
yeah, this came out, and people were like, holy shit, you can get a Bonneville again. And it looks like an old Bonneville, and the fucking retro craze was born.
So technically, the W650 did come out before this. But
I know, but
this in the consciousness, this is what kind of kicked it off. Now,
yeah, look, if this was a fucking hurricane, it made the W650 look like a fucking lawn sprinkler, right?
It's true. Now, the reason I'm picking this bike specifically is not that it's technically a bad bike. It's that if you're getting one today, you're kind of insane. And the people that are selling them are also kind of insane. Because there were a lot of changes to this bike between this and what came very shortly after it. There were a lot of model year updates that came out. And this bike is basically about as bare as a W650. And it's carbureted, and it's now 24 years old. Actually, really 25 years old. And
so new Bonnevilles are technically vintage.
Kind of, yeah. Well, not only that, but like these bikes, not only that, these are also carbureted. And
this is before the fake carburetors.
This is before the fake carburetors. And not only that, no one fucking cares. Bonnevilles are just everywhere now. This wasn't like the beginning of a new thing. This isn't a big fashion statement anymore. And it's carbureted. It's got carburetor maintenance. It'll have 25 years of wear and tear and all the little MacGuffins that a 25-year-old carbureted bike has, and people are asking for stupid money for them. For
Really?
something.
Still? These were overvalued for a long, 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 long time. But I've kind of felt like everyone that really wanted one bought one, and the bottom would have fallen out of the Bonneville, the Hinckley Bonneville,
So
thing
I
by now.
did basically a nationwide search on Craigslist before the show. The lowest price I could find was $5,000.
Yeah, that's too much for one of these. Uh, I mean, I could see spending $5,000 on a nice clean W650 because it is technically like weirder and rarer and slightly more legit than this. But I mean, again, they've been making these for another 25 years now. I mean, this is legit, let's face it.
Mm.
Like, and it's not a bad motorcycle. It's just maybe it's still a little too hyped.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where we're going with this?
Well, no, it's more the fact that the 2002 and 2003 and 2004 and 2005 Triumph Bonneville exist. So there's in no sane world would you get this first year carbureted bike over any other year. It just makes no sense.
Well, I think when you're buying this bike, what year you don't really care. You just want a bike that looks like an old Triumph Bonneville. And let's face it, it does.
Absolutely.
It's kind of shocking how much it looks like an old 60s Triumph Bonneville. If you put it next to like the fucking, 1200 Bonneville they make today, I mean, and said like, okay, which one's the classic Bonneville? Well, being 25 years old or whatever, this technically would be classic, but like if you put this even next to like a 60s one, you can tell which one's the newer one, but like maybe just a random person off the street could not. I mean, that motor is trying really hard to look like a classic Triumph motor and to some degree pulling it off.
Oh, absolutely.
It's doing its double overhead cam thing like the old Triumph Bonnevilles. I mean, it's air cooled and it's got the black the black painted jug and the white fins, and the tank is the right shape pretty much. We all know that those seats are terrible that are on these things, but whatever. But the wheels look right, the fenders look right, the pipes look right, the seat hoop, the turn signals are a little bit kind of plasticky, newfangled, but the headlight, the instruments, the handlebars, it all looks right. As you stare at this bike, you're sort of like, I don't know what they could have done to make it more classic, right? Besides a Kickstarter, I don't know what you can add to this to make it
right.
right.
But
And
ultimately, the problem with this is that, again, like ultimately, there's this weird thing that happens with the T100 and the T120, is that as you go further and further back in model years, the price doesn't go down.
right, and that's because there's a bunch of magic loaded into that word Bonneville.
Right.
And when you buy one of these, that's all you care about. You're buying that Bonneville magic. So whether you like it or not, someone buys one of these and spends $5,000. I think that's too much to spend on one of these, but whatever. But they are buying that great big Triumph badge on the tank, and they're buying that fucking name, that Bonneville that's written on the fucking battery cover. And that's just always going to be worth $5,000 to people. I don't know.
It's true. But you could also get a 2010 for $5,000. So go do that.
Yeah, but then with this one, they get to like hold their head higher and go, well, it's not fake carburetors, or
Nobody
it's.
fucking cares.
I know nobody cares, but how the bike makes you feel is important, and the dude riding it will be like, nope, real carbs, and that'll make him feel a certain way. Um, I don't know. I agree with you. This should be a $2,000 bike. 2,500, somewhere in there. If it's really clean, we can go to maybe 3.5, right?
Yeah.
Because this is going to be what? This is going to be, again, like 55 horsepower. It's a 650. It is double overhead cam, but it's still a 650 air cooled twin.
So spec sheet says 62, but I'm sure it's like 57, 56 of the rear wheel, something like that.
Maybe even lower, right?
But
Okay.
no, it's pretty good. I mean, it is. They did just go straight to 800, supposedly. So it's like, it's a little better.
Oh, this is an 800.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, I believe 62. Okay, sure. I mean, it's not huge power, but it's totally enough, right? It'll do
Yeah.
100 miles an hour. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Okay, so it's an 800. I guess that makes sense because when the Bonneville died, it was already at 750. So it's like, well, we got to make one bigger than the last one, right? So
Right.
yeah. Okay. I think that really that's the beginning and end of this is how much does a person still value the magic loaded into that word Bonneville? And I guess really the question is how much does that jump generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these might be listed at $5,000, but are they going to be listed for $5,000 by some dude who bought one of these for I don't know how much 25 years ago? And they're like, God damn it, it's a Bonneville. It's just worth this much. And I don't, it's some old dude that's like, I don't particularly need to sell it. So I'll just wait till someone gives me the $5,000. But they're going to fucking die with this motorcycle. And then their wife sells it for 3,200 to some 27-year-old.
Potentially, yeah.
So the question is, how much does that magic switch, right? Because the kinds of people that are all about that magical word Bonneville, I feel are people who are brand new to motorcycling and people who have been riding for like too long, if there is such a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get these old guys who get all misty-eyed about a Triumph Bonneville, and the story used to be like, oh, some hipster gets into motorcycling and they're like, well, I'm an old soul, so I want something like a Bonneville, right? And I wonder, because Triumph has done so much like hard work to give themselves a new legacy, not just trade on what they did in the 60s or a different company named Triumph did in the 60s, right? Hinckley Triumph in its own right has so many cool and interesting models, from the Tigers to the Street Triples, in all this stuff, right? And the Trident 660 and the new Rocket 3s and all this stuff that I quite frankly is so much cooler than anything old Triumph did. And I think someone getting into bikes now, I don't know if they instantly go nostalgic for a time they don't remember. I'll admit I did. Like I was starting. I think I bought my first bike like the year after this came out. It would have been like 0203, something like that. And I if I could have, I would have bought a Bonneville at the time, but I was fucking broke. So I bought a Nighthawk 650 for $700.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was so much more and a better bike than I thought it was going to be. And I kind of wish I still had that bike. It was pretty good, actually. It was like 80 something horsepower, shaft drive, hydraulic valve lifters, like air cooled, very low maintenance, easy to live with bike with all the power in the world that you need, actually. It was a Nighthawk 650 because it was like a weird sort of chicken tax kind of era because mine was an 83. Actually, I don't know if that's before the chicken tax. I'd have to look that up again when that was. But like, yeah, they made a 750 and a 650 for reasons not clear to me. I'm very glad that's the decision that I made. Well, no, it wasn't the decision I made. The decision I made was to get a bike at any fucking cost. And that was the maximum I could afford. I fucking bought it on eBay. Remember when people still bid on things on eBay?
Yeah.
I fucking won this auction. So it was actually like, $702.36 or something like that, right? And the dude delivered it the next day from Fort Wayne. He drove like 4 hours because he needed to get the cash because he wanted to buy a Honda Sabre. So he just drove it down, and while I was at work, he dropped it. Like, I gave the cash to my neighbor, and she gave him the thing, and he just like left the bike, and I told him to just put the title through my mailbox. And I just came home, and there was a fucking bike that I'd bought off eBay. It was great. The easiest motorcycle purchase I've ever made. I wish people still actually bid on things on eBay. It wasn't just buy it now prices for weird shit from China, but whatever. But yeah, if I'd had $5,000 lying around or whatever else, I would have bought a Triumph. And if I had enough money, I would have bought an old Triumph. God help me, right? I admit that I fell victim, and there was a lot of magic in that word Bonneville, and I was like, oh. And of course, I thought all the stupid shit that new people think. Like, I was like, oh, well, even though I don't even own a motorcycle yet, I'm the type of person that should own one of these because I would appreciate it and like feel its history in my soul or what. And I was completely full of shit. I would have hated riding it. I wouldn't have been able to take care of it properly, and on and on and on and on, right?
Right, yeah.
But I'm so far removed from the me that bought that first motorcycle, when I was like 19 or whatever. I'm so far removed from that. I don't know. I don't know what if people still do that. Do you think they do? Because our question, because based on your answer here, Swigs, the bottom falls out of this market or doesn't.
I don't think that's the thing. I mean, okay. Let me put it this way: if you were still shopping for a dirt bike, and you saw like two YZs, and there was like a YZ, 2008 and a 2009, and they were in similar condition, the same price, and one was carbureted and one was fuel injected. In what universe would you take the carbureted bike?
Yeah, there's no universe.
Right. That is the scenario between this and every other Bonneville that's available used.
Right, but the difference is that this was a bike bought for prestige back then. Nowadays, this is somebody's first bike.
Well, yes. But no. I'm not sure
And
what's
when
getting lost here.
So when it's your first bike, you don't know what a pain in the ass old carburetors are. 25-year-old carburetors. I mean, new carburetors work awesome. You're like, if you have something new with carburetors at very low miles and the carburetors haven't been fucked, you're sort of like, I don't get what everyone's big concern with carburetors is. That mine seem to work just fine, right? It's old fucking carburetors that are the fucking problem, right? So, someone who's new to motorcycling doesn't understand what a pain in the ass old carbs really are. And I think that this I mean, you must still be able to buy these carbs new, I think. But again, it's going to be someone's first bike. So they don't know what they're getting into.
Right. And
so
then for that person,
in fact, they might even be tempted to go like, oh, well, I'll have the actual carbureted one because that sounds more legit. Maybe 65-year-old dudes won't make fun of me if I have a carbureted bike. And I can be like, I'm a real man. I know how to motorcycle the proper way because I have carburetors. Right?
they could.
I'm agreeing
It's the
with you
same.
that it's an insane decision, but to them it's not because they don't know how badly this is going to go.
Well, it's not even that it's necessarily going to go badly.
Oh no, it's going to go badly.
It's more that it's something that's going to become an obstacle to riding and a thing that you have to take care of and a thing that a new rider probably won't. And it's just going to become a gigantic obstacle to riding. Like it's kind of a trap.
I don't know why Triumph couldn't have just put one much bigger carburetor on this and had it feed both cylinders. I mean, is this going to be like a 180 crank?
But it's probably a 360. I mean, it has to be. Because that's what the I know that's what the W650 was. No, why would it be a 180?
I'm just you're gonna want. Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But like, you just want it. You want it so the if to feed it with one carburetor, you want the intake strokes to be as far apart as possible.
Yeah.
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 But
that's not 180.
Otherwise, one of them's going to be getting like slightly less fuel than the other, right?
Mm.
Like I said, if it was a 180, it would go like ba-bang, 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 right?
Mm.
When it's 360, bang, 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 they'll be even.
Yeah, I don't
right?
remember when everyone started really messing with the firing angle on on old Parallel Twins.
I don't know. I'm just saying, but like if they
Yeah.
had to, like in this modern day, well, it's like Harley Davidson Sportsters managed just fine off of loads of Harley Davidsons. Harley Davidson's always managed to run just fine off of one fucking carburetor, right?
It's true,
What like,
but yeah.
but is a 2001 like 800 Bonneville T100 so fucking powerful that it has to have two carburetors
No, but they would have done it no matter what, just because it has
to
to
make it look like the old one, right?
Yeah.
But they could have fucking just called it the T100 Tiger, which had one carburetor like back in the day, and then had the two carburetors on the Bonneville. They could have done that and done them as separate models and cheaped out on some stuff for the Tigers. They could sell a slightly cheaper one. Like they could have done that. And then a lot of people would have been like, for sacrificing like 5 horsepower or whatever, the Tiger's a lot easier to live with. I think a lot of people would have realized that. Anyway, point is, yeah, for these to still cost $5,000 and cost the same as like a 2011 or whatever, it's all just in people still falling for that magic. So whether or not people are getting into motorcycles and still falling for that magic, there's definitely a perception amongst the majority of old fuckers that own these things that people still do respect that magic, right? We have to assume that, otherwise people wouldn't be asking so much for them.
Right.
It's yeah, because for $5,000, I mean, I would just go ahead and spend the extra $1,000 to get a new Royal Enfield Interceptor 650.
Yeah.
It's got an old British name on it, right? It's actually the Royal Enfield company that it was in the 50s and 60s. It's a perfectly good motorcycle. It looks great. It rides. It makes sense for modern roads. It's fuel injected, and it's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with it. Whereas this would have who knows what going on with it. Yeah, I don't know if these had problems or not or whatever. Yeah, you buy this to cosplay as an old cafe racer type dude. You buy one of these thinking, I'm going to ride it to England and hang out at the Ace Cafe.
I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything more to add.
I'm going to beat up dudes on Lambrettas. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Should we move on to best bike in the world this week?
Let's do it.
Okay. And the best bike in the world this week is any year. I think they made them from like it was like 93 to 2001, something like that. The Honda XR 200R. Otherwise known as the only dirt bike most people have any business owning. So, this is such an interesting motorcycle, and about every 8 months, I become obsessed with these things again. And you could just take any year Honda XR 200. I mean, they changed between a couple different frames and things, a couple different basic designs, but they're all pretty much awesome. That one that you found there, that picture, that's kind of my favorite look for them. So the Honda XR 200R is an enduro dirt bike, so it comes street legal. And unlike the Yamaha WR, the Honda XRs are a lot less performance driven. But because of that, they're so much more reliable and they're so much more usable. So the Honda XR 200R makes so much less horsepower than like a WR 250, for example, of any year. Your average 125 two stroke or 250 dirt bike is making high 20s, low 30s kind of horsepower, right? Which frankly is just too much for the dirts. Unless you're an expert rider.
Right.
And here's the reason. If you have a bike that's too big, it will massively hinder your ability to learn to ride dirt. Massively hinder. You know, like when I got the 450, I was like, oh, this is fucking fine. I'll just put it in third gear and treat it like an automatic, right? But that's not a very good way to ride. And honestly, the thing was just so twitchy and like the power came in at weird times and it just, it was awesome, like how it pulled up hills and things, but ultimately just that bike was ridiculous and it was just holding back my ability to ride. So these are sort of like depending on different factors, sort of high teens, very low 20s in terms of the horsepower. I want to say it's something like 15 foot-pounds of torque. Now this sounds like pathetic power numbers, but this is way more in line with what you actually want. It's not like 8,000 feet tall. Like, is it a motocross bike? No. But are you a motocross rider?
Right. Yeah.
The answer for almost all of us is fuck no. Right? Almost no matter what you're doing, really all you want to do is go somewhere and just kind of fuck around on the dirt. That's the most fun thing ever, right? Riding as if you're training for a race isn't actually super duper fun. Okay? The whole point, like if you're going out there riding dirt for any other purpose than just having fun fucking around, you're kind of setting yourself up for disaster. Some of us will be just sort of touched by God and we'll get into lessons early on and go down a road where, you know, you buy a super powerful bike and whatever. But it turns out the things that actually matter are being able to get that back tire spinning and feeling it out through a turn, right? And then knowing how to get it to lose traction and then hook up and regain. It's learning to get that leg out there and turn and whatever. And you don't need a lot of power for any of this shit. And if you don't believe me, there are so many videos online of professionals with like 1970s dirt bikes just kicking the shit out of dudes with the newest 450s. Right? Even the pros will tell you that even the pros don't want a 450. They would rather have like a 300. That like nobody wants 450s really. Everyone just thinks that they do. So the funny thing about the Honda XR, and we don't talk about this really, everyone focuses on the sport bike speed wars, but possibly starting at an even earlier time, there were some massive dirt bike speed wars. Like ultimately culminating in the 500 two-strokes. Like, to this day, I'm not sure who's making anything more powerful than like a CR 500.
Well, certainly in terms of like power to weight ratio, it's just ridiculous.
Right. Those 500 two-strokes were just like they were like 60 horsepower. Still think a lot of 450s are at like 55, 56 horsepower. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think, like, they kind of hit a limit and we're like, I don't know. Right. But Honda
Yeah.
early in the game, because
But they
they're
don't
Honda.
even beat modern 450. They don't even beat like modern 450s or 250s, because it turns out all that power, like without the right suspension and geometry and everything, like
Yeah, it's all
doesn't
for
matter.
naught. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the Honda with the XRs was sort of like, well, this is not a dirt bike Speed Wars bike, when almost everything was, right?
Right.
This was playing a different game. This was Honda going, check it out. Out of the box, you can ride it on the streets. You can ride it to the track and just start fucking around. Here it is. It's everything that you want. You know, and these things at like 20 something horsepower, like with the gearing, they still do like 65 miles an hour on the street. You know, at least 60. And they do, and like it's a little bit of a compromise on the gearing. So, like, is it the most optimal thing for like racing in dirt or whatever? No. But that's not what this bike is. This bike is the thing that's actually usable for your skill level, because you're not a fucking pro. Okay? You might look at it and go like, I don't know, it doesn't have inverted forks and they're not like, you know, the size of my wife's thighs, and you're like, you don't need forks that big. That you don't, okay? Like, they're filled with hydraulic fluid, and that hydraulic fluid is still not compressible, right? Do you know what kind of jump you're going to have to go over to fucking bottom these forks out, right? Or, like, honestly, like, if you're making the jumps correctly, like, these forks are just fine, okay? Your only problem is, like, you just might case something really fucking hard and hurt your forks, okay? But, like, why are you doing that? Maybe go to some of the smaller jumps, bro. Like, and maybe do like American Super Camp or something, or get some lessons and learn how to get that fucking back tire out behind you instead, and really learn the things and the fundamentals that riding and ultimately racing and other things are all about, that they're actually built on. Work on your body position and everything, and then when you've reached the limits of this thing, go and buy a fucking YZ250F or whatever the fuck. But in the meantime, like, this is the bike that will help you get your skills together, not a brand new fucking 250. Like, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the philosophy of this. And again, like, as a testament to how awesome these bikes are, I don't think I've ever gone to the dirt track and not seen 5 of these things. Like, they seem to all still be running. Like, every one that was ever made.
I don't know if I would recognize this one particularly from my memory, but I do see every time we've gone, I have seen a lot of XRs, which, given they've been out of production for quite a while.
I mean, there was also a 400 and a 250 and whatever. Well, I mean, they essentially do make an XR again. It's the Honda CRF 250F.
Yeah, but like,
But to me, I'm like, ugh, it's kind of got 5 horsepower too much. Like,
well, Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's particularly a problem, but I know what you mean. Um,
Yeah,
but
in order to learn, you just want something smaller, less power, a little bit lower to the ground. Like not a miniature fucking bike, but like I said, I kind of need one of these in my life or something in this zone.
yeah, I mean, well, this is kind of the same problem we have like when we go to the dispensary and we have to ask, what's the weakest shit you have? Really?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
and they're like, why would you want a bike with less power and features? It's like because it's too much. But I don't know. That seems to be a little bit harder to find in the dirt bike world than anything adult sized. Everyone kind of has to have the latest and greatest, which is a bit silly.
Yeah, and again, if you think like this is a bike for wusses that no one can accomplish anything on, like check out Torture Test magazine. Just like pulling these things out of the trash basically and just like almost completely unmodified, just, throwing a carb on one of them, like tuning it up a little bit, like the minimum needed to get it fucking going and racing, and then just like getting decent race results on one, because it really is true. Like off road, nothing counts nearly as much as just your skill level. I that's it. And you need less power to build your fundamental skills. So
Mm-hmm.
again, these things are cheap, they're available, they're street legal, they are four stroke, and some of this might be the world's easiest to maintain four stroke motorcycle ever, right? Because the whole thing was just built to be fucking tough. I I don't know if this is true, but there's rumors that Honda said like these things had to be able to run like 8 hours without oil or something before they would approve the engine designs or something like that. Like they are fucking tough motors because they're not about making giant power. They're fucking just two valve, single overhead cam, like just the easiest fucking valves to adjust that you've ever seen in your goddamn life. It's like this top end rebuild is like two stroke fucking top end rebuild easy. It the you can get kits for them all fucking day. Just like every other Honda, the everything in the bottom case of the motor is just unfucking killable. That you could fucking just thrash these things all day, change gears without the clutch, whatever. The bike's just fucking fine. Like I said, they all appear to still be running. These
Right.
like the only thing that's given up is the seats, right? The seats are largely made out of duct tape now, but it seems that every other part of these motorcycles is still running just fucking fine. I mean, Alakai's tough little like XR80 is just still kicking ass. I keep expecting it to just blow up one day, but every time I kick it, it just fucking works.
We've abused the shit out of that bike as well.
I
Uh,
know, and it's still just awesome. I don't know. I need an XR200 in my life, but it's there's not really a whole lot on the market today like this. Again, the CRF 250F essentially is one of these things with like a CRF perimeter frame, but it's an air cooled, single overhead cam XR motor, just like these.
oh, it is air cooled.
Yep,
Okay.
it's basically like one of these, but with a CRF style frame and electric starts. And I want to say it got a little bit bigger. Like it's not a full size dirt bike, but it's a little bit bigger than the old like 200R. But it's a much more sort of civilized, low power, reasonable bike for trail riding and whatever else you want to do. And there you go. So I don't know. Um, yeah. So I mean, if anyone really thinks they need more than this, I need to see your credentials. Like, I want to see a couple trophies. You know,
Yeah.
I need to see some pictures of you whipping it in the air to convince me that you actually need something more than this. Because I don't think you do. You know, I think most people aren't even really up to honestly riding the XR 150L to its limits. I think most people today aren't even really up to that, like, 11 horsepower that thing's making or whatever it is.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, I mean, they're as much as people have, like, talked about, like, motorcycles declining, you know, with bikes like these, like, I know so many people who said, like, oh yeah, back in the day I had an XR, or I had a, whatever, or I had a Hodaka or something. Like, when you talk to older guys who ride, it seems like all of them rode dirt at one point. And the notion of, like, everybody having a dirt bike in the past is, like, today, like, it doesn't really come up today. But also, like, it's so easy to just end up dropping, like, $9,000 on a dirt bike. But, like, I mean, there have been a handful of, like, of models that are more affordable, but, like, it's really kind of crazy compared to, like, relatively, like, what people spent on them back in the day. And maybe if there was a wider range of, like, cheaper bikes, like, there'd be more people, like, trail riding and stuff. But I don't know. It just seems like the number of riders today, number of people riding dirt today and riding trails today seems way lower. And I wonder if, like, this endless chasing of power and, like, performance has kind of been responsible for that.
Google something for me real quick. The XR 150 that they're selling now, I want to say that it's carbureted. Is it carbureted or fuel injected?
Let's see.
Because honestly, I would seriously consider buying one if it was fuel injected. Like a lot of people, I took one look at it online. I was like, well, that's cool for other people. And then I saw one in a dealership and I was like, ooh, this is a little bit more like this is a little larger and more substantial than I thought it was. And again, I was watching videos of Torture Test Magazine putting one through its paces, and he was like, it's not that bad actually. There's a couple mods you can do to get one of these things sort of in order. And I would not be able to abuse one nearly as much as him.
Oh shit. Well, so this is carbureted.
See, that's my problem, only because we're in Colorado and I can't fucking just jet it every time I take it to the mountains or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that.
But this is only like $3,000.
Yeah.
That's kind of tempting.
Yeah, it's essentially just an Indian bike that they sell here.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, it's I think they're like 11 horsepower or something. They'll do 55 just barely, You can ride one on a state road. They come street legal and plated and everything, and you can take it to the track. But again, like 11 horsepower again, you'll learn to ride and then you'll outgrow it and you'll sell it for not much less, right? Is if it's a working motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
What you think in 1 year you're going to learn to 100% like take advantage of everything it can do? Okay. Well, then, you sell it for 2,400 or something like that, used, being a year old or whatever, with however many hours you've put on it, and then you'll put that into your next bike, and it was worth the money. I don't know. Yeah, I could be
That is
convinced to have
tempting.
a. I could be convinced to buy a 150, but the 200R just has a certain look about it that's really my jam as well. The Honda red, white, and blue in the old school dirt bike, stuff. There's something special about it. I am a big fan of the white ones with the red seats that look like Alakai's too, only because it's got that Terminator 2 factor for me.
Yeah. I don't know why, like, they still do those paint schemes in Europe, but in America, it's either like solid red, solid white, or solid black. And it just,
It does suck.
like, why can't we get good paint schemes here?
I don't know. I don't know. Every Honda should be red, white, and blue. Like every Honda.
Although
Okay.
I think my favorite was the red Honda with, or my favorite was always the CBRs with like the full wings down the fairing.
Yeah. And those were good in black and gold as well.
Yeah. Or when you got it with the full wing and in the red, white, and blue, like
Yeah.
those.
What Repsol with the wings?
Yeah,
That was good. Oh man, we're living in a world without a Repsol Honda.
I know.
Ooh, we'll have to talk about this next week, but Sepang testing just happened.
Ooh.
So we need to get caught up on that. All right, let's get to some emails and things now. Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it. This one actually, I need to pull something up. So this is from Ian, who says the subject is electric bikes down under, and he says, "G'day, Pete and Swiggy, and occasionally Mike. So I've listened to you guys banging on about the cons and cons of electric bikes for a while now, though I thought I would introduce you to a manufacturer based here in Oz that you may not be aware of. Now I'm approaching an age where I would like my bikes fucking carbureted, and am obviously a fan of Neo Retro, whatever that is. Not really a fan of electric bikes, but the specs on these are pretty impressive. Bear in mind that the prices are in Aussie dollars. So he and he says, enjoying the podcast while I'm trucking around the country. And then he also showed us a picture of this super
Is he
awesome.
trucking around the country like Slim Dusty?
I'm guessing across the middle of the country because he's apparently
The
driving
windshield
this
wipers
awesome
going back and
train.
forth in time. Yeah, and I can't believe this is really happening to me. Yeah. Oh, I love these fucking Aussie semis, these fucking B trains. That's what they call them, right? Or something.
In the U.S., I believe we call, when you're pulling two trailers, we call it a B train. I don't
Well,
know what they call them in Australia.
well, this dude's straight up hauling 3 right
Yeah.
here.
Well, it's, as you know, most of Australia is a lawless wasteland. So
Man has to make his own justice. Yeah. Okay, so what is this motorcycle brand he wants us to know about?
So I think this actually this does kind of demonstrate kind of really what the limits of electric are. So it's kind of interesting. So it's called Savic. And if you look at this bike, like,
Well, first off, it looks like something that's not actually for sale. It just looks like it's not for sale.
these are for sale.
I know, but they look like they're not.
Yeah. But like, first, I mean, just looking at this bike, as you can see, like, this is like basically as bare as you can get. There is no component, there's nothing, there's no piece of metal or plastic on this bike that isn't doing something.
You know the Will Smith I, Robot movie?
Yeah.
This looks like the motorcycle that like the I never saw it, but like I feel like I've seen like enough clips. The first robot that becomes like sentient or like disobeys or whatever. He's like this is the motorcycle where that robot would have been like, I'm an old soul. This is the bike for me. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, so if you look at this bike, it's this is really like as much as you can scale up an electric bike and like still have it kind of somewhat make sense, but I would argue not really. So,
Well, again, implementation's everything,
mhm,
and price point and what the buyer values. So, I mean, like no one's intentionally buying like some sort of shitty motor or shitty batteries, right?
right,
It's all engineered towards a price point.
right,
Electric just sort of has a certain performance, and you're just going to get what you pay for, and just depending on what it's designed to do, it will or won't, like it.
yeah.
So what are our specs here? What is it going for?
So it's 60 kilowatts, which is like I want to say like 85 horsepower. So they're saying a 200-kilometer range, so like 130 miles, realistically 100 miles.
Right, yeah. Well, I don't know, maybe less. If you're doing that at 80 miles an hour, well, it's really, unless you're in the middle of nowhere, which you're not going to be in Australia on an electric motorcycle,
Right.
you can't really go above 60 miles an hour anyway.
Yeah. And I don't see this bike as being particularly aerodynamic. Um, so it's
Well, again, is
yeah.
that 100 miles or 130 miles of range? What we don't know is that at 25 miles an hour?
I would assume it would be like 55 or kind of, but again, I wouldn't know. So, and this is, and I think it's basically like level 2 charging. So it's like, it's not like any kind of full on supercharging or anything, which it shouldn't be because it's basically just like max out a breaker on your house at 240 volts, which is really all you need. But so that comes out at $16,000 US, which, I mean, maybe compared to like a Del Mar or like any of the smaller Harleys.
Well,
is
the
somewhat,
Del Mar claims more battery, more range, and more power for the same price.
what is yes? What is the Del Mar? So 16 grand for the Del Mar,
So the same price as this.
and it says the Del Mar only says a city range of 113. This says basically about 15 miles more. The Del Mar does claim to be a little bit faster as well, but it's probably the same charging.
But again, it doesn't really matter because if you really open the throttle on either of these bikes, you're going to need to stop at like 60 miles to recharge.
That's true. Yeah. But yeah, I think comparing it to the Del Mar is good because I think it does kind of. In fact, I do think like on a lot of little things, the Del Mar is a little bit more refined. But like, I do think this is kind of proving the rule from what you said. I don't know if it was last episode or the one before it, but like this is kind of the peak of what you can do with electric. Anything more than this
Well,
requires some magic. Like,
Well, yeah, there's that, but also well, no, you can do a lot more than this. It just requires boatloads of cash.
Yeah, but even then, it doesn't matter. You could have $1 billion. It's you're not getting more without the bike being heavier or having less range. Like there's
Right.
we yeah. Maybe with like a few with tens of billions and a really big research budget in 10 years, maybe it'll get a little bit better. But like it's sort of like it's like trying to find a gigahertz processor in like 1985. Like not for
Yeah.
all the gold in the world can you have it.
If I
It's
lived in a major city with super secure parking, um, and I had more money than sense, maybe I could go for one of these. But as it is, it's going to be a challenge for me. It would be a challenge for me to like ride one of these to work and back. And I'm sorry, but if I can't take it to work and back, I I can't really go there. Now again, if you like, basically want an electric like around the city kind of thing, and 100 miles is shit tons of range for any fucking city, right? I mean, at this rate, like you could ride it around all day, set it charging, and like it doesn't even have to fully charge. You go around, ride it around the next day, right? I mean, it's kind of tricky to go more than 50 miles in a day in Denver,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So, if you just want to have something electric that is taking you 50 miles around a city and you just want the ability to be able to go 0 to 100 really quick, and that's what you value, then great. More power to you. I just don't see the electric revolution happening for most people because I don't think that's aligned with most people's needs or desires in a sort of luxury vehicle.
Yeah.
That's all. It like yeah, my point the other day is like this is the top. So some people will want something like this and it's going to make them super duper happy, and they're going to love the fact that they almost never have to maintenance it. It's mostly going to be in the tires and the brakes that they're doing their maintenance. Every once in a while they're going to have the forks done, right? But like whatever. That's not a lot of work. So
Well, even
great.
then, like you can get a lot of your braking out of regen still. So, like, unless you're hard braking on something, like you're not doing a
Yeah,
lot of
your brakes are going to last a long time.
you're
It's
not going to
true.
do, and you don't do a lot of trail braking in the city. So
I still think you should be changing your brake fluid every couple years, but
there's
okay.
that. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing you're going to want to keep up on is chain maintenance.
Oh yeah, because this is going to be mid-drive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's chain maintenance. It's not totally maintenance free, but you also there's a lot of people that love electric because they like the idea that they're sort of familiar with a motor. I mean, in reality, they're actually not. They have no fucking idea how an electric motor works, but they're like, oh, I know that I can just not think about how it works
Hmm.
because the internal combustion tradition wasn't something passed down in their family. So, sort of the electric promise, a lot of that is, well, you're never going to ask to be able to prove your manhood on the side of the road. And that's a comforting thought to some people. And, if that's worth it to you, awesome. Great. Go for it. But this doesn't, like you said, Swigs, this doesn't really move the needle any more than the Del Mar. It's really kind of the same thing. We're going to see a lot of bikes with very similar specs to this.
Yeah.
But, I from what I've been hearing, there's no way that they're selling less of these than Livewire is selling Del Mars.
Yeah.
Apparently, Livewire sold like 40 bikes or something last year. Or maybe it was like 160 or so. It was a crazy small number.
Yeah.
And according to my source, which is really just Cleveland Moto, like Harley Davidson decided to all of a sudden pipe up and say, "Oh no! All those sales count for us, so we get government money for being an electric vehicle seller." Ridiculous. All right, whatever the emails we got.
Yeah. So we did get a message from John on Patreon who said he enjoyed the Easy Rider commentaries way more than he ever thought he would, which I don't think reflects well on you, John. I'm just going to put it out there. That was kind of a shit show.
Well, again, like we got pretty sloppy drunk, but I think we stayed on message about those movies.
Yeah, I guess we did kind of, for the second one, we did kind of keep pace with the quality of the movie itself, so there is that.
I mean, we could kind of start measuring time and before and after we saw Easy Iron Cross Rider calling the ride back. It changed the game. You know, as far as motorcycle bad motorcycle movies go.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways that, when people really kind of separate the U.S. into kind of a pre and post 9/11 world, I guess this podcast really now has a pre and post Easy Rider too.
I know. It's
It was.
I mean,
it was a real milestone.
I'm with you and Mike in that it's not really a movie or a commentary that you could recommend to a friend. Like, I could, with a straight face, recommend The Dirt Bike Kid to somebody.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, listen, this movie's stupid, but it has a certain charm to it. And and you will laugh and you will have fun. You know, I cannot guarantee that even 20% of people watching Easy Rider just don't get angry at how bad the movie, Easy Rider 2, how bad the movie is. It's, if you have to enjoy a certain kind of shit show to get all the way through it with a smile on your face.
Yeah. I guess he also says, we've been on a real tear lately, looking forward to a new one. I'm assuming, I guess that's maybe a commentary on our sobriety. But yeah.
It could only be. Yeah. What else we got?
See, I don't know. Let's do that.
Well, I know I think it was on the Discord. It might have been on Patreon. We have a listener who has a Honda Hawk 2 Adventure.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Well, he has a Honda Hawk 2 that has saddlebags and a tank bag attached, and he's done some adventure length rides with it.
Nice.
Have you found it?
No.
Oh. Well, anyway, yeah, it's a proper Hawk 2. You know, and then looking deeper into it, I didn't even realize apparently there's a Hawk 3 as well, and it looks awesome. There's like a Japan only Honda CB400N Super Hawk 3. So we've talked about CB400Ns before. And I guess like the very first CB400N was the Super Hawk 3. And then they kind of became the other CB400s, which every CB400 is awesome. If it's a CB400, it's an underrated bike.
Mm-hmm.
But we're really into the CB400Ns that had the motor after this, but the one with like basically the Rebel 400 motor is the Honda Hawks that we're talking about here. But yeah, he said he was super excited to learn that he already owned the bike that's sure to be the newest craze, the Honda Hawk 2, the Hawk 2 Adventure, and I'm so into it.
Yeah. So we definitely got some fan mail here. Well, one's from Junkie, which I'm definitely gonna read out. He says, "Junkie, good call by Swigs on the TL1000. Everyone that I know who has owned one said it was deadly. Obvious not to them if they were telling me that, but you get the point. No one still owned their TL.
Yet you
So
don't see a lot of them.
I think there's a reason for that.
There is. You see a lot more like SRAD Gixxers and stuff like that than you do TLs.
So then we got another fan mail from Graham, who, in response to the worst bike in the world being your dream bike, he says, "You are wrong, sir. The dream bike exists, and it is the NC750X. I dreamed it. I watched and waited as it sat, waiting to be discounted on the dealer floor. I bought it and loved it for 6 years now. Buy the dream."
Okay, we'll see how that turns out. I do hope that the CB750X is indeed your dream bike. I love
6 years is a good run.
it is. It is. I mean, this is one self-reported account of the dream working out. We're not mounting massive amounts of evidence against my point here, but it's a start, and I'm listening, and I'm open to it. If anyone else has a dream motorcycle that seems to be working out well, I legitimately want to know how that is working for you and what led to this, because it's just not something I think happens very often at all. But okay.
Yeah. And this has all been a little bit positive, so let's just end on a little bit of a sour note. Well, not really, but something negative. Josh from Pennsylvania says, "Thanks for calling out the rich fuckers who take years on a trip and then write a book. I don't fucking care about you book, you asshole."
Yeah. Josh also recently sent me a like the highest trim level Victory Vision for sale, like his local dealership, and was like, "Yo, you should come out and buy this and ride it back." And I'm like, oh, I'd be so tempted if I wasn't saving up for this 3-week trip to the UK this summer right now. Ugh, it's so brutal. I just every like bit of money that I'm saving for this trip, I'm like, oh, I could be rebuilding the Lambretta motor. I could be buying a Victory Vision. I could anything, but like, I'm just like, God damn it! This is all money that's gonna go to like the fucking like trains, Indian restaurants, tickets for the London Eye. Just like, ugh.
Well, don't forget the London Dungeon.
Yeah, the London Dungeon, Warwick Castle, the Cadbury Factory. West Midland Safari Park will be worth the money.
Yeah.
We might get a caravan at the Cambrian coast in Borth. You know,
Solid.
that might be worth it too. We'll see. Anyway, all right. We must have something else. Or is that the end of email feedback for now?
I think that's what you got for now. I could probably troll Discord, but I actually don't see anything all that new on here. Let's just call it there for now.
We'll call it. Yeah, we can comb through it and find more stuff for next time. So, all right, we got a little bit of time left here. How about we do a talk on our topic here? When bikes peaked, right? So let's go through a few different categories here. I think it's easiest to start with sport bikes, the most performance oriented, and kind of like work back from like most performance oriented to least, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the question I was asking earlier to you, Swigs, was what is the earliest possible bike that, um, with the exception of fuel injection, right, you could just still sell today?
Ooh.
And the public, and as far as the public goes, nobody would practically know the difference, right? And I think it might be like in sport bikes, the Gixxer 750, right?
Well, like I think the 2013 Gixxer 750 doesn't look all that different from like the 98 Gixxer 750. Um,
No, but I'm talking
yeah.
like the Vanilla Ice Gixxer 750.
Oh, I mean, discounting like styling cues and things like that. Like,
But like as a riding experience, it goes
yeah.
fast as fuck, like faster than you can legally ride on the street. You can race it and get a knee down. I'm sure someone could get a fucking elbow down on it these days with new tires and all that kind of shit. I If sport bikes never got better than the Gixxer 750 for the vast majority, like we're not talking about like the top 1% of riders and racers here. We're talking about people who are buying motorcycles to ride exclusively on public roads.
Oh yeah, I would say like for like the bottom 90 to 95% of sport bike riders, you can easily go back to probably at the bare minimum like 2002 or 2003 for like just early fuel injection.
Right, but I'm saying let's just pretend you had fuel injection on like an 87 Gixxer, right? So we're
Hmm.
accepting fuel injection in this because then it's like, well, everything's just going to be from 2004 and this
Hmm.
conversation doesn't go anywhere, right?
That's true.
So
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 probably
with the exception of fuel injection, how far do you go back and functionally for the average rider, the experience is really no different.
I'm just trying to think. My gut says somewhere in the 90s, but I'm trying to think what bike it would be. Um,
Like the F4i?
Maybe the F4i. Or yeah, maybe just like a late 90s like CBR.
Again, I think like so like 87, 88 Gixxer I think has all the same stuff. It's certainly got the power. It's got the brakes. It's got the suspension that like a 90s CBR has. It's got like cuz if you
I
go
guess
older
yeah.
than that, if you go to like say like a like the 900, the first Ninja, right? The GPZ 900. We're talking about a frame and a weight and, you know, air cooled and all this stuff. And like, I don't know that you can ride one all that hard.
I do
Like,
think
I don't know.
mm,
I'm sure someone has, but I've never seen a picture of someone getting a knee down on one of those.
yeah, so I think if you built that bike today, you definitely struggle, but also I know you're probably going to disagree a little bit, but I think at with that even with that much power with modern rubber, like I don't know if like the forks and everything are kind of up to a modern feel. And I think quite a few people would be able to feel that. Um, but I don't think you have to go much past it.
Well, people aren't getting at extreme lean angles on public roads. Again, we're talking about riding on public roads, not on the track.
Um, I think you would still feel it to a degree.
I think you would feel it like on a GPZ. I don't know, like with the Gixxer though, if it would really like feel much different. And again,
Potentially.
like riding an 80s sport bike on the road today feels very different than riding a brand new sport bike, obviously. But we're saying like, what if they were still making that bike brand new? Because when you ride an old bike that's had refurbished suspension put on it, so brand new seals and everything, fresh oil in the forks, um, you know, new springs, and everything set up and adjusted for your weight and everything at the right height, the sag set correctly and everything. It's ridiculous how good even like late 60s, early 70s suspension is.
Yeah. So
Like
like,
when it's new and
or
it's
like,
working the way it was intended, it's shocking how good old suspension actually is.
yeah, like if an early Gixxer 750 was just time travel to here right now, and
Yes.
it didn't have 30 years,
And
30,
it had
35
fuel
years,
injection.
and
I don't know that many people would appreciate a difference in how it rides on public roads.
definitely not a huge difference, I don't think. Yeah. Um,
I think 87 is kind of. Bring up a picture of an 87 Gixxer. I mean, this is a bike that it's funky looking, but it's a twin spar steel frame. Actually, it might even be aluminum. It might be twin spar, like an early twin spar aluminum frame. I don't know if it's steel or aluminum, but it is twin spar. It's got like I said, we're not allowed to complain about carburetors. Just imagine they kept making it today and they added fuel injection in. Yeah, I fucking love this bike. It's so cool. I mean,
I'm trying to think.
like on public roads, is that square swing arm gonna make a big difference? I don't think it is.
No, but yeah, I mean, unless you're being a real ass on public roads, the forks are probably mostly fine. Um, I'm just trying to think. But I mean, again, I think the big caveat here is like, also all of these bikes were kind of built, and I think this is like the one piece of motorcycle technology that will never max out because you can always have adverse conditions and it can always be more adaptable. Um, these bikes were made for late '80s rubber, and they were made with limitations of the tires in mind. So I think to some degree there is something you would feel in that.
Well, you wouldn't be obliged to use late 80s rubber. We were saying like what so like the
Okay, yeah.
scenario in my head is they just never stopped making this particular bike and where replace items, you know, you're allowed to put new modern tires on it, right?
Mhm.
You're allowed to put new brake pads on it. You're allowed to use modern oil. You're allowed to use modern brake fluid, all that stuff.
Mhm.
We're just saying Suzuki just went, all right, here's the blueprint for a Gixxer 750. Thus it is written, thus it is so, right? This will never change, right? Would the average rider make a difference? I don't think we can go back any further than this.
Mhm.
But
This is probably close to the edge, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so that's sport bikes. What do you think it is for let's kind of like stay on performance. So let's talk about like like motocross bikes, supercross bikes, or whatever, right? 250s and 450s, kind of.
Um, would they notice a difference? Like, I don't know if you can go too. You can. I don't think you can go anywhere near as far back, just because. I mean, even if people can't use it, just the amount of horsepower that was gained,
I think
like
it's 2001 with the
with the YZ 250F,
yeah.
that's probably around it. Like 2000. Well, 2000 was the five was when the 5 cylinder started, right?
I mean
Or
the five
or
valve.
the 5 valve, yeah.
I think it was 2001.
Okay.
And I think
Yeah.
O2 you get the auto decompression. So let's go with the auto decompression for the O2.
Yeah. Auto decompression is kind of nice. That's probably yeah. So yeah, I think if you go any further back than that, it's like, what are you just gonna drop like 20% of your horsepower and not have auto decompression and think it's the same? Probably not.
So if you're talking two strokes, I mean, you might be able to go back a little bit further.
Hmm.
It's like late 80s, early 90s with like a CR 250.
I don't know
But
if you can even do that though, just because like a modern dirt bike, you can just they're so abusable.
yeah,
Like you can just I mean, you can just absolutely like any kind of 2000s performance bike, just the forks got bigger, which in most cases isn't going to make a huge difference. But when you absolutely just like case it off of a massive jump, like your fork seals don't explode, like
right.
the bike
Yeah.
can take so much more. I think early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going to go O2 is sort of the peak. There's no reason for anyone who's not a professional racer to buy more than that. I don't think there is. I don't think there's a compelling case.
Mhm.
Okay. What's another category of bike here? So what about like standard bikes? Like standards, nakeds, street bikes. Not sport bikes, but like street bikes that are sort of non-sports.
Just kind of like a standard UJM type, or
It doesn't have to be UJM, but like an unfaired, like non-sport bike.
mhm.
So not a cruiser, but just a standard bike. How far back can you go with a standard bike that just functionally would be no different except for carburation versus fuel injection? And I think it might be the CB750.
So potentially, I don't. The one way I would disagree with you on that is that the CB750 is just a big heavy bike, and I think
Oh, and because now you can get something with 60 horsepower that's so much lighter, that is appreciably better.
yeah, because you can get the power of a CB750 out of a twin that's like 150 pounds lighter.
Okay, well, let's come up with the oldest model that you think does that at the lightest weight. So let's go with
It honestly might be like a Nighthawk. Maybe like a Nighthawk 650.
well, that's more power. Yeah. So we could at least immediately go back to like 81.
Yeah.
Okay. So 81 I think we can go back further though. There's got to be some sort of like late 70s thing.
Well, what about Mike's bike? The
The KZ.
yeah, the KZ 550. What was the first year KZ? I
So
actually don't know if that gets us much further back. Well, 79?
yeah, the Nighthawk's a much nicer riding experience.
Mm.
So it's got to be able to have anti-dive forks, and it's got to have adjustable suspension. How far can we go back for adjustable suspension for just like a cushy street ride?
For a standard? I don't know. Hmm. I mean, I don't think we can. I don't think we can count the Goldwing as a standard. Um,
So I'm thinking for a modern bike, actually, it's going to be a little bit newer. Um, I think it's going to be, well, no, because it's still not standard to have like adjustable suspension on a standard bike. It'd be nice, but it's still not now for just a standard street bike. So I think that the Nighthawk's not a bad one. I mean, the Nighthawk essentially is what the CB750 turned into. Um, Geez, it's hard. We keep naming like Honda models here. Well, except for the Gixxer 750, but like,
no, what are you talking about? We started with we started with the Gixxer, then we
and
went
then
to
we
the
went to the
Ys.
Yamaha. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the Nighthawk 750 is kind of as far back as you can go. Again, hydraulic valves, like low maintenance shaft drive. Um, the 750 I think was like up to like 90 horsepower. I think you had all the instrumentation there and everything you'd want, the fuel gauge and all these things. For like a standard like modern bike that you would buy, I think it's kind of got every creature comfort and thing that you need for like a base level, but like yeah. I think like I don't know. See what the first year for the Nighthawk 750 was. Or maybe the Magna.
Let's see. Magnum was 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, so's the Nighthawk.
Um. Okay. Don't trust AI's Google answer or Google's AI answer. Uh,
I
was it
think we have
90s?
to go with some sort of like late eight, like some sort of 80s power cruiser, because that's going to make sort of modern power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the power cruisers for the time are going to have about some of the best suspension around. So I mean, I think the power cruiser era just has to be sort of the peak for just stand standard. Well, power cruiser is not really a standard. Jeez. Yeah, I have to go back to the Nighthawk because the Nighthawk's a standard bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think standard bikes have gotten better since the 750 Nighthawk. I've talked myself into it. Okay.
So
What's our first year?
82.
82. There we go. If you're buying something after, 1982, you're just wasting money. Okay. So here's an interesting one. I think this has a very different answer than you might think. Cruisers.
Cruisers. So it's really going to depend on.
So my answer is 2018.
I think you might
Cruisers
be
have
right.
peaked with the latest Goldwing.
Well, you can go that route. Depends if you're going to separate into touring or not. But yeah, I mean, in terms of touring, absolutely, the latest Goldwing is.
I should say, yeah, not cruisers, touring bikes. Yeah.
In touring bikes, I would agree. Like, yeah, they're really.
Because when we talk about the average rider experience with these bikes, like something that has meaningfully gotten better in cruisers almost every single year since the beginning of motorcycles is comfort,
Mhm.
is long maintenance intervals, is like every piece of aftermarket you can imagine to adjust the bike to your specifications.
I would also also with the Goldwing, the just that low center of gravity and the engine balance is absolutely unreal, and there's really
It's
nothing that matches.
unreal in my 78, and it just doubles with every model that came after.
Yeah, and also I would say that like on touring bikes, that is a place where you really can count on things like all the creature comforts, like heated grips, like cruise control, all that stuff.
Right.
Like that is kind of intrinsic to that kind of bike and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you use it like having CarPlay or Android Auto and having everything on the screen in front of you are controllable, that is kind of I think that does apply more on that kind of bike than on a standard bike.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just like, yeah, if you want to put me on my Goldwing versus a new one, like the difference is night and day. And would I rather be on the new one? Absolutely. It
Mm-hmm.
is in every way noticeably better at what it does than
Mm-hmm.
than an older one. And this kind of goes for every cruiser, right? Like they've just been all getting better from every manufacturer. So
Well,
whether you're talking
if you're
about
also
a
talking about, well, I would separate it out into, well, I guess the answer doesn't change that. Well, it's a different bike, but if you separate it out into like touring bikes and like cruisers, like Harley style bikes, um, I don't think you go that much further back actually, just because for so long that style of bike has just been severely underpowered. And having like even just going back to like a Milwaukee 8 is such a massive jump in performance over the older pushrod motors
yeah,
that yeah, you really can't go too far back on those either.
uh-huh. Yeah. Um let's see here.
Yeah, so I would say for cruisers, like when's the first Milwaukee? Or I guess you could also go with you actually like that, or I guess you could go with some of the Polaris bikes. Um, whether you're going for victory um, or why am I blanking on this? Indian
mhm.
with the early liquid cooled ones. But yeah, you really can't go. You definitely can't go earlier than 2010 for cruisers.
Okay. So again, as far as just the regular day-to-day user experience, what would you say for scooters?
I think that's a bit of a harder question.
It
Uh,
is.
um,
Well, we can split this into
let's see.
like we can give like a manual answer and a CVT answer.
Hmm. I don't know if I know enough about scooters for the manual answer. Um, for CVT, I mean, what are we talking about here? Well, I guess everything's kind of been fairly uniform, but um,
Well, no, I mean, so this is an interesting one because CVT scooters are getting faster, right? Like the new like Honda 160 motors, like they're doing like 67 miles an hour, 12, 14 horsepower, something like that, like right out of the box.
Mm.
And, with amazing fuel economy and all this sort of stuff, like there's an argument that it's worth buying a brand new twist and go scooter. Like the new Vespas are incredible. They've got fucking like Bluetooth apps for them and stuff, and they've got they finally made scooters with fucking charging ports for all your shit. They like supply enough juice from their stators for shit like that.
Yeah.
Like the lights have never been better, and let's face it, scooters have never really been reliable until recently. So, the whole promise of the scooter is it's small and simple and uncomplicated, right? You need to
Mm.
just kind of be able to walk out to it. And scooters, I think, are relied upon for actual transportation, not just fun. I think a lot more than motorcycles.
Yeah. Well, also, I think,
So the idea of being able to commute every day on a scooter is kind of, for the first time in America, really a big thing right now.
I guess also, like, if you're living in a city, even like some basic modern features that seem kind of trivial, like keyless ignition,
Right.
are kind of a game changer. Where it's like, was my bike fucked with today? Let's find out. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's just modern scooters are just the best, and you really can't go very far back. I mean, I think yeah, probably just if we just say like the modern era of scooters, like in the last half decade.
Well, I mean, like I said, even like the Honda PCX, right? Going from 150 to 160. I mean, that's a noticeable difference in four-stroke scooter power there,
It's true.
right? I mean, and like a Buddy 175, like forget about it. Like it's so much like torque, and you're riding two up in the fuck. I was riding one two up in the mountains in Hawaii, just like never a lack of power anywhere, just blasting around. And I can't imagine doing that with, like, before those scooters, what really existed with that amount of power, with that reliability, with electric starts, with, that kind of parts support at that price,
I guess like,
you know,
well, maybe not at
that easy to ride.
maybe not at that price, but maybe like a Honda Elite.
Um, I suppose like an Elite 150 would have definitely
Yeah.
a 250, but yeah, okay.
But I've never ridden one like in like as it was at that time, so I wouldn't really know. But yeah, I think that's a tougher one.
That is tougher. Well, yeah, I guess with the displacement though, that's a tougher thing because those elites, it's a funky motor compared to like the more GY6 style of like those PCX motors. I mean, they're not GY6s; they're a different thing, but they're GY6 styled motors.
Yeah.
So for a two stroke, I think I have to go just for the Vespa 200. Has to be the answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably like the Rally 200. I think after that, you don't really get a lot of meaningful gains in a two-stroke scooter. Um, I mean, there certainly were faster ones, right? You know, your scooter, for example. But I think
That's
for
a little bit. I don't think that's
yeah,
in. I don't think we can put that in the running.
right, exactly. I think like a Vespa Rally 200 just hits 60 miles an hour and doesn't have to strain real hard to do it. Um, for two strokes, so that'd be like very late 70s.
Mhm. Yeah, and even in the, even though there is stuff like the Bajaj, is it the Chetak? That's the
Yeah.
yeah, like you
No,
don't
Jetacks are four stroke. Well,
yeah.
no, I think they
Well,
switched at one
well,
point, but
I mean more of like as a manual scooter. Like yeah, the modern ones don't make any more power really.
no. But it's also sort of like like I said, like when they were new and everything. I think the rallies were sort of like figured out. Like by that
Yeah,
point, Vespa had made so many fucking scooters, they kind of just like got it working. And the rally came with like all the turn signals and shit. When like if you look at my Lambretta, there's a lot of things missing, like mirrors, like yeah, like turn signals. Like all it has is a fucking headlight and a brake light. That's it,
yeah,
right? Um, there's not a lot for comforts or features on it whatsoever. Whereas even like an 80s Vespa or something kind of surprises you with a couple little features and things that it has, right? You know, by the time you get to 1979 with Claire's Vespa, it's like, okay, well, you know, we've got turn signals, but also like they beep, you know, and you've got a slightly less wimpy horn, and you've got your glove box is standard, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's a couple little things in there that are really nice to have, right? Or just think about like the Vespa having the fucking sight glass for the oil, right? You know, the fact that it's auto mix. Auto mix is a big deal, right?
hmm
Oh, actually, I don't know if a Rally 200 is auto mix or not. If it's pre-mix or auto mix. I no, it must be. It must be auto mix. That's got to be the answer. How far can you go back with a two-stroke scooter that comes with turn signals, standard, and auto mix? That's as far back as you go.
that sounds about right.
I'll bet
Okay.
that's the Rally 200. All right, cool. Um, so what do we want to say for adventure bikes?
Uh,
Do we go back to the GS 1150?
so I don't know because I mean, yes, there's more like kind of little farkles and things that matter, which I think kind of matter in the same way that like the
Is this kind of like the cruiser touring bikes where maybe spend the money on the new one for all the things that might matter to you?
it kind of depends. I mean, obviously you would be able to tell a difference because of things, like things like having like a recluse clutch. Well, not a recluse clutch, but like a like a quick shift. Not even a quick shifter. Well, I mean, basically like factory recluse clutches. Um, I don't know what if there is a generic term for it. Um,
Well, it's a centrifugal clutch.
well, sort of, but that I always think of that meaning more like a Honda style.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
those are, but I mean, a recluse clutch is also a centrifugal clutch.
it's true, Yeah, things like that. I think having things like the electronic suspension that you can auto adjust kind of makes a bigger difference. Things like
Yeah.
having, I mean, and even just for like the touring part, things like ABS kind of make a difference. Um, and also for adventure riding, like different
Does the
traction control modes.
TFT actually make a difference for map navigation?
I don't know. I couldn't answer. But things like I think having different rider modes with different traction control modes for different surfaces is kind of a big deal.
You're right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. Mm.
so I think that's definitely much more
Turning
modern.
traction control on and off, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah, and also things like having ABS and being able to turn it off. Um, so I would probably go to
2018, 2019 right now for something that has kind of all the features.
yeah. I mean, I would need somebody who could pick out like what the differences are
I don't know that the
between.
1300 has a lot more than the 1250 had. Like all the things you just said, like the auto adjusting suspension and everything. I haven't heard about any mind blowing features the 13 has besides 50 more CCs and a boxy looking tank.
Right. And like in the past 10 years we've gone through like each manufacturer has gone through like 7 generations of their adventure bikes in different
Except for
ways.
Honda, who basically made like
The Africa Twin and then
just the
said
Africa.
like
The Africa Twin went from a 1 liter to an 1100, and that
yeah.
was really it.
Yeah, so I don't I it's somewhere in the last 10 years, but I don't think you can go much further back than that. But I couldn't pinpoint the year and say like this is superfluous or this
I'm
is
gonna go first year for the GS 1250 then for all like the cushy creature comforts that
Mhm.
can make a difference on some of these things.
Okay, so it's going to
And
be like
right now
2018,
that's yeah
2019.
2018 2019 that's gonna be the peak for adventure bikes right now. That might reset some point, but for right now,
Mhm.
yeah. So maybe if you're in the adventure market, like look for something 3 or 4 years old that some dude's decided he's just not going to ride anymore, and that's your smart buy.
Yeah.
Okay. Ooh, I know there have to be more categories, but I can't think of anything, which is weird. We know motorcycle categories. I must like. I feel something wrong with me. Under normal circumstances, I could just name categories of motorcycles for um, forever and ever and ever. So we talked about scooters. We talked about dirt bikes. We talked about cruisers and standards and tours, adventure bikes, sport bikes. Um,
I'm trying to think of
I mean, weirdly, we've kind of mentioned it with electric, right? Like, I think electric probably peaked, like peaked, with the Zero SR. If you want to talk about huge performance versus like massive long range, like it comes with this ridiculous price tag. But who's to say, like, a few years from now, the market on those isn't going to crash or whatever, and it's like, well, why would you
mhm.
like what's got more range and power like when you put those together, like the sum total than the Zero SR?
Well, it's either going to be the SRX or the SRS, and then I mean I think the live wire one's probably pretty close to that as well.
It's fairly close. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean I think yeah probably you can go back to like 2016, 2017.
So yeah, I mean, really, we're saying like the market, they're taking things away. They've gone for less than 200-mile range, less than like 130-mile range. Really, is sort of where they're settling. Where people seem to be somewhat still, not reluctant to buy it, and they're bringing the cost down. But I think, yeah, I don't think we're going to see many bikes that have that, boast that 200-mile range, because the SRS was like 200 miles, right? Or they claimed so. I'm sure that was 200 miles at like 43 miles an hour, but
let's see. Let's see. It's 171 miles.
171. Okay.
Mm.
Actually, that might be just about what the Livewire 1 was claiming. The Livewire 1 might actually be the peak. It had the level 3 charging as well. I mean, it was ridiculous at like $30,000, but
So you can buy one right now for like $23,000.
well, I think it's down a little bit from the Harley Davidson Spect one.
Oh yeah, you're right. So it's 146-mile range, and yeah, the
I think when it was
SRS
Harley
is
Davidson,
the SRS is like $2,000 cheaper as well.
so we'll just go with the SRS right now for like kind of the top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since then it's all been downhill on specs and performance, but also it's been down for price, you know. Weirdly, if I wanted something electric, I still think like that Zero FX is kind of the one.
Mm-hmm.
It's their most affordable one, but it's like, listen, like the range is nonsense on all of these anyway. So just give me the one with 60 miles of range.
Yeah, I think
I'm fine.
they did list the highway. They do list the highway mileage for it, and it's like 40,
Right.
which is like. But if you take this on the highway, you're an idiot. Like if you're expecting to get anywhere on the highway.
It's an around town bike that you can also do a little off roading with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit more affordable, and it's a Zero, so it's got like some support and whatever. So that's the one I'd go with. But again, I wouldn't go for it because I'm not going to deal with all of the stupid mandatory updates and all that kind of nonsense, and it spying on me and giving away data and all that when there's absolutely no purpose in it doing so.
Mm. Yeah,
Like it'd be one thing, but it's of absolutely no benefit to me. So, yeah, there's just no reason. Okay, so we've covered election. I think that's about it, or that's all that's really worth going. But it's interesting to put this in perspective this way because what I kind of come back to, what got me thinking about this was sort of, I was thinking about that XR 200R, and I was like, if they just made it as a off-road only bike, like could they sell an XR 200R like exactly the same as it was again today?
yeah,
And would it be a useful thing for people to buy? I think it would. And I thought, well, how far can you go back? Because I was watching videos of like pros on like Honda Elsinores just like kicking people's asses in like hair scramble races and shit. And I'm like, it's kind of like really skill that matters so much more than anything else. And I thought, well, okay, in a sport bike, what do I really care about?
yeah.
And I kind of thought like an old Gixxer, I think would be enough. Like, I don't know that practically day to day, it would be really any different than an R6 or whatever. I just don't think.
And to get to where we did with all those numbers, we also did just like only exclude really the most trivial things, Like, obviously, like, TFT displays would just be, like, a hard stop on everything if that wasn't out. But, like, also, there are things you could just decide that if you don't really care about it, you know, we can push all of those numbers really far back on a lot of different bikes. Like, for touring bikes, if you don't care about, like, having rider modes or, like, cruise control, like, you can kind of, like, if you had like a sport tour or something like that, you could go way back. Like, you can push all of those numbers back like another 10 years, you know.
I think for touring bikes though, like the latest creature comforts, like, again, that's something where we adding creature comforts is something that has been where there's meaningful progress has been made.
Yeah,
Going
but
fast on the road, going fast on public roads, meaningful progress has not been made since the 80s.
yeah, or rather what, and even then what progress has been made is mostly in tires.
Right.
So, yeah, but I mean, like, again, like, if you're making a, for anyone out there making a personal choice, you know, if you decide that, like, this one particular thing doesn't matter to you, like, the bike at which you will see no difference, like, just can go back decades.
Right. Yeah. Um so yeah, I think if I was to it sort of just makes me feel better about all the bikes that I've had is really what I'm getting at because like, I was thinking like, oh, do I want another sport bike at some point? Because I was like, oh, well, I had that ZX6 Ninja, but I was like, was that really a sport bike? 'Cause it was carbureted. It was only like 100 and like just over 100 horsepower, and it was kind of like closer to 500 pounds than anything. I was like, have I really had an inline four? And I was thinking, like, no, I think I did. I think I did have a proper inline four sport bike.
Yeah.
I honestly, you could say, well, unless it was like, past 2003 and fuel injected and blah, 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 blah. No, that's when sport bikes really hit their thing. I'm like, I don't know. Uh, how would I have ridden an R6 any differently, really? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah.
I took that ZX6 Ninja up to its top speed one time. One time. Just to say that I did it. And all the conditions were right. I was like, okay, I'm in an area. There's no lights around. I can't see a car in front of me. I can't see a car behind me. I can just open it up and I'm not being stupid, irresponsible. Like, the bike's been maintained and whatever. I'm just going to go in a straight line and hit 130 something. And then I backed off and that was it. I don't know if I ever broke 100 miles an hour on that bike ever again after that.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I broke 90 on it after that. And I think I would have done basically exactly the same thing with an R6, except I might have hit like 140 something, right? I don't know. Or maybe I would have hit like the 136 that they were limited to or something. I don't know. Well, no, realistically, I would have bought one used, so someone before me would have like taken the limiter off of it. So I would have hit 140 something or whatever, and then backed off. But otherwise, every way that I rid it would have been exactly the same.
Right.
What was the appreciable difference in my experience? Nothing. So I guess the idea is like we've discovered something interesting. If you're getting a cruiser, it's kind of worth getting something brand new because it will be better. Like if that's worth it to you, there are gains being made there.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll be 4 times the cost worth it, given what's
Right.
available. But yeah, there are
A
some.
new cruiser is definitely more comfortable than an older cruiser.
Yeah.
That That yeah, because that's what's important in those bikes, that they're comfy. Um, huh. Yeah, and for like a standard bike, I mean, we kind of came up with an answer with the 750 Nighthawk, but I mean, it's really just kind of like any bike after 83, right?
Hmm.
In general, it's just like, well, it's just a bike. And when you're talking about just super basic bikes, there are even some examples where a bike from like the 90s that's been cared for really really well might be better than some modern brand new budget bikes, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
Like like what's something that just comes with really awful suspension? Well, so like right now, a lot of like 3 and 400s are super popular, right? Because they're
Hmm.
affordable and approachable, right? And in people's price range. I, like, yeah, they're like bigger and heavier and whatever, but like, you know, some old Magna or a Super Hawk or whatever, just pick your 80s bike, a fucking phaser, right? Um, versus let's say like the Husqvarna Svartpilot. Now I really like that bike, but a lot of people complain that the suspension is no good and the engine's no good and whatever, right? It might
Hmm.
feel like it's just kind of gutless and like a little toy to throw around. For a third of the cost, if you find one that someone's cared for, like you can argue there's a lot more to be had from the right phaser,
Yeah,
right?
or like a Honda Ascot. Like,
Honda Ascot, yeah. I was thinking about again like the sport bike thing. I saw a for like $6,000 a Ducati 748, and I was like, ooh, I'd be really tempted to pull the trigger at like 4.5. I don't know about $6,000, but I was looking at the numbers. I'm like, it's basically 100 horsepower, 55 foot-pounds of torque, and it's a cool V twin, and it's a real Ducati, and it's got that 916 body style, so it's just absolutely beautiful. And I was like, but would I want like, again, like a real sport, but would I want something from 1998? And I was like, what am I talking about? This has got everything you'd ever want. This is a complete experience.
yeah,
So I guess like, the point is that some people think they've got to get the newest and latest and greatest because if they settle for something else, they'll be missing out. But again, like if you're buying something that's past like 1980 something, in the vast majority of these cases, you're not really missing out.
yeah. I mean, well, it's like so like for me, like it's sort of similar in a lot. I mean, there are some marginal improvements and some things that may be nicer, and there is kind of like the whole, well, this is a new bike and it's under warranty, so I know it's like not been like fucked with. But for me, it's sort of like the same as like the best phone I ever had was from like 2013. And aside from not being able to get software updates, like I don't think I did anything with that phone. I don't think I do anything with my phone today
That
that
you didn't do with that
that I
phone.
couldn't do on that phone. Like
Yeah.
it would, if with a new battery and if
Yeah, it's like the iPhone peaked with the 4S, you know?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and other people take more pictures and like care about having like different zoom lenses and like weird AI features and stuff. But I don't give a fuck. I
Yeah.
I watch YouTube and I listen to Spotify and I take phone calls and send emails. And that hasn't changed. And a lot of things haven't changed on bikes.
or they don't need to. Like, because I was saying, Honda could sell an XR 200R today. I mean, I guess here's the thing, listeners. What? Send us an email or a text or whatever. What bike, with the exception of fuel injection, if you just made it fuel injected, do you think could just totally sell today as it was, right? I mean, if Suzuki put out a Gixxer 750 that was just fuel injected, I think people would buy it. They'd be like, "Holy shit! Like I love how this looks. It's so retro cool. It's like, you know, I think people would buy it and be perfectly happy with it."
Yeah, dig out the old engine molds and let's get cracking on it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you'd have to like have some sort of magic in there for emissions, I guess, or something. But let's just say
Yeah.
that was no, what else could just totally be sold today? Because again, I think Ducati could pull out the 916 and be like, check it out, our new bike is just the 916 again, and people would be like, dope,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, also let's look at the bikes that actually have kind of done this, like the TW200 and the KLR 650. Like,
Yeah, it's so weird because every car company seems to be trying to sell a car that looks as much like an older car as they can get away with all the modern safety regulations. But motorcycles don't have any safety regulations. The only thing is European and California emissions.
yeah,
So if you didn't care about selling in Europe or California, like Ducati literally could just make new Ducati 916s and sell them in 49 states.
I think that's pretty much true. Yeah.
Right. It's not like, well, hold on a second. The windscreen needs to be like between these angle ranges. Like, no. It's like, hold on, the bumper has to be of this kind. Hold on, you need reinforced A pillars and B pillars. Like, no, there's none of that. There's no reason that Ducati, like, besides emission. Like, it's weird. It's like Ducati, like, go ahead and keep selling, like, your V4 or whatever that's super competitive. But, like, is there particularly a reason that you can't just keep selling the most beautiful motorcycle you ever made with just a newer, like what if Ducati made a 916 4?
Yeah, I mean, really, what they should do is like just take like a certain time period, like crank out, and get all your production done for everything else, and then just make like 40,000 916s, and then just like seal them in crates filled with argon gas so that they're like sealed in time and won't like will be perfectly preserved, and then just like we'll sell like 500 of these a year for like the next 50 years. Like, yeah.
Or Honda could just make old single overhead cam CB750s again. There's absolutely nothing stopping them besides emissions. But we're talking an air cooled, but like if it's just the matter of putting a catalytic converter on it, right?
Mhm.
Because, well, there are still plenty of air cooled like motors on the market, right? And I think Honda's well capable of putting together, a 725cc inline four air cooled motor that makes 60 something horsepower and has a catalytic converter, but otherwise is just basically identical to an old CB750. I mean, you'd put on like a different, electrical system, I guess, but not that much different. Not that it would look any like they could just make old CB750 frames exactly like they used to be.
I don't even know if the electronics really need to be more up to date. Like the automotive industry, like
Well, you
it's
don't
starting
want
to get
like selenium rectifiers, right? You
well,
want
no, no, but like even like modern cars, like certain parts of your car will run on like on certain parts of modern cars like will have boards in them that have like chips that were designed and first produced like 40 years ago. Like there's all sorts of ancient stuff in what you would think is a fairly modern car.
Yeah,
Like
it's just odd to me that when the motorcycle industry does like a new version of an old bike, why it's not basically just exactly that old bike.
um
Oddly, in the case of the first one we talked about, that Bonneville, like those are ridiculously close to what old Bonnevilles were.
I mean
So,
stylistically yes, technologically they were actually way better performance and way more reliable. Um, but in terms of like going back and like making the exact same thing, I mean, that's kind of a monkey's paw wish right there. Like, I mean, look at the Bullet 500. Like,
well, right, but that's like old fucked out tooling. It's
yeah,
again like yes, dealing with an old CB750 is kind of a nightmare these days, but they weren't nightmares when they were new.
right. But if you went and looked at
They were,
like,
in fact, extraordinarily reliable when they were new.
I think,
But
an
no one foresaw them hanging around for 50 fucking years.
right. Well, I think there's another angle is also kind of like if you asked Honda to like, you know, put a gun to somebody to like the CEO's head and said you have to go and fish out every mold, every piece of like the first year like 1200cc Goldwing, like although even though I bet they still have like every bit of tooling for it, like
No, I don't think they do.
being able to find it and put it all together.
No, they'd have to like reverse engineer one.
Right, and then there's also just like all the knowledge lost off the assembly line, and obviously like the assembly line is today is not the same assembly line that produced that bike.
I would just be
Like
I'd be Honda and I'd be like, let's just pull the one out of the fucking museum and take it apart,
just scan it.
scan everything, and then put it back together again. Yeah, this could be done pretty quickly. Yeah.
I don't know about quickly. There'd be a lot
A
of
lot quicker than starting with a blank sheet of paper.
that's true.
So anyway, everyone like wants something new and something better and something whatever. It's like I don't know. I'm kind of like leaning into this like idea that motorcycles have been not broken for a long time. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. Like you say like oh well all these designs these would be a nightmare to live with today. I don't think they would if they were new
Yeah.
because look, frankly, I don't know how well a lot of bikes today are going to be holding up in 18 years, right? We've talked about what a nightmare dealing with these TFTs is going to be. And, people talk like, oh my God, Goldwings have so much fucking wiring. Everything has so much fucking wiring now. There's no such thing as a simple wiring loom for any bike anymore.
That's true. Yeah.
That and you don't know where any of these fucking wires are going, right? Like on Ditch's Ducati Monster, right? He was trying to track down some stuff and he's like, it's all just wrapped up in this loom and I have no idea where anything's going. It just is. It just is, and it's fucked or it's not. Like that's kind of it. You can't, on it. Yeah, there's no such thing as a CB 350 anymore, where you can just kind of like take the tank and the seat and the side panels off and just sort of look and see pretty much the whole wiring loom. Like, that's
Yeah.
not a thing and hasn't been for some time. Everything has miles of fucking wire in it now, and computers and sensors and shit you don't understand.
I will say, actually, the Italjet is actually probably closer to like a CB350 than a modern bike.
Oh yeah, there's no computer anything on it, and it's two-stroke.
Yeah.
There's no exhaust, like O2 sensor. There's no there's no temperature or anything. There's no anything. It's
I think like the only like thing that absolutely like isn't 100%, the only two things that aren't entirely like absolutely required, for it to be like street legal, is it has a fuel tank light, and it has a reserve light for the fuel tank and for the oil tank.
No shit. The thing on that bike that the most research went into, the most technologically advanced thing, is the size and spacing of the transfer ports on the piston.
Probably, yeah.
That is the most technology that's in that thing. And that came around in like the late 60s, early 70s from fucking East Germany, of all places. And then over the years, a couple people like inched the performance up a few more percent. But like that's it. That's the most advanced thing. I mean, people might look at it and say, oh, well, no, it's the center hub steering. I mean, that's just linkage. Linkage like that has been around since the Second World War. No fucking problem. It's just, yep, this universal joint goes to this joint, goes to this joint, goes to this joint. It's not hard to understand at all. But, but like airflow, fluid dynamics, that kind of stuff. Like, someone spent a lot of time to figure that out. But other than that, there's like fuck all for technology in your scooter. Fuck all. it's ridiculous. I mean, after that, it'd be like, yeah, the CVT, the variator, and all that stuff would be the second most advanced thing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all right, we're like 2.5 hours. We got to end this.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's remind everyone to stay safe, stay tuned, keep fighting or fucking the dragon. And, don't be afraid to tell your friends to listen to our podcast. Spread the word. And I guess maybe keep an eye or an ear out in coming weeks for a video element. And we're going to try to tape this thing here in the Tiki Room. And yeah, let's run the outro.
Let's do it.
And I don't want to die. Just want to ride on my motorcycle. Cole.